let's play Rosebud, Thorn. Rose, something that's going great. Bud, something you're looking forward to. And of course, the thorn is what I really want to hear, right? What's a challenge? What's really like, what's potentially making you a flight risk? These are the things I was listening for. And I used that with new people. I used that just like I would do what I now call a stay interview. You know how we all pay attention to exit interviews, which is phenomenal, but they're gone. They're out of the building. We now do stay interviews in my department. But I would look at that thorn as, what are they telling me? And what are they telling me that other people might think? Or what other people might feel?
What's up, everybody? I'm Chris Ronzio, CEO and founder of Trainual, and this is Process Makes Perfect. As always, we're talking with experts in process automation, creation, delegation, basically the people that make business easier. You just heard Claude Silver, and this episode is all about the process of bringing humanity into the workplace. Claude is the first ever Chief Heart Officer. How cool of a title is that? She's had 20 years working in numerous advertising agencies and building up Fortune 50 brands, and she found her true calling working at VaynerX as the Chief Heart Officer. This episode's a little bit different than normal because we usually do these podcasts as just regular interviews, but this came as a live interview from our event that we hosted called Training with Empathy. So you'll get to hear me and my brother Jonathan, who's also our CMO here at Trainual, talk with Claude really candidly about how to be vulnerable as a leader, how to infuse empathy into the workplace, especially if you're expecting others to do the same. This is also a two-part episode. So in the first part, you'll hear the introduction and everything Claude. It kind of shapes the conversation. And then you can tune in again next week for part two. She had so many great takeaways, so I know you'll enjoy this one. So enjoy this. Stay tuned. Part two next week.
Can this business thrive without the owner?
You got to start putting systems and processes in place. If you don't use the systems, the business will break.
We're always looking to buy back our time.
You cannot say something once and expect that it actually is received.
This is the way we work.
A big motivation in that for me is creating a job for myself that I really enjoy.
This is how you discover your vision.
And this is Process Makes Perfect. Hey, Claude.
Hey, Claude.
How's it going?
It's going so good. How are you?
I'm great. I love the red behind you.
Oh, thank you. Actually, so I'm up in my music room here. It's my jam space.
Sweet. I love it.
So cool. Well, we're thrilled to have you with us. I haven't seen you since when I was with Jonathan in the offices. I know you guys have talked a few times, but great to see you again.
You too. Where are you today?
I'm in Scottsdale, Arizona.
Awesome.
I know we're lucky to have warm weather, but it's hitting 100 degrees early or this weekend. So we've had it so good up until this point, and now we're in for trouble.
All right. Well, it's great to see you again.
All right. So everyone, welcome back to our final session of the day. I'd love to welcome Claude Silver. Claude's the world's first ever Chief Heart Officer. I don't know if anyone's copied this title, but as far as we know, world's first Chief Heart Officer. After nearly 20 years at numerous advertising agencies, building brands for Fortune 500 companies, Claude actually joined VaynerMedia and then called it quits. Is that right?
It is right. I resigned.
So we're going to get into that story. She found her true home and calling at VaynerMedia, but left and then came back. So Claude, can you give us the background on how you ended up back in this role?
Yeah, absolutely. I'd love to. So I was initially hired by Gary to be the first SVP, and I was running big, very large brands, if you will. And that loud voice in my head just came booming forward like it had before, and I had suppressed it, which is, advertising isn't for me, but I care about the people. I just literally want to make a home for people. That is what I care about. And so I went to Gary and I said, thank you so much. You're the greatest person in the entire world. This is the greatest agency I've ever been in, but I'm done with advertising. And in his wonderful way, he said, what is it that you're interested in doing? And I said, I only care about people. I care about the heartbeat of this place. So heartbeat. He said, great, I need you for 18 more months. And I said, I can give you 6. So 6 months came around. And I didn't know what he had cooking, and I resigned. It was it. I was really done. Like, I was done. And 4 months later, he and I sat down for breakfast, and he said, "That's it. You're coming back. You're going to be chief heart officer." And I knew what that was because it's who I am, right? And I said two things. Great, amazing. What are we doing here? And he said, "We're building the greatest human organization of all time." Cool, sign me up. And I said, "How do we know if I'm successful?" And he said, "You will touch every employee and infuse the agency with empathy." And that is my job description 4 years later.
Now, what did that mean to you when he said that? How do you even like go about creating like a strategic roadmap to infuse the agency with empathy by touching every person?
Well, the great thing, Jonathan, was that I had already been there for 16 months. So I had built up a lot of equity with people. I was already running a team of 50. So I knew the fabric of the culture already. I'm a real intuit and empath, so I can feel things really easily. But I had to think very quickly because the job was originally to scale him and then to scale me, right? Because I'm only one person. So instead of going to the micro and all of the stuff, the schmutz on the carpet, I decided to lift up to the macro and say, okay, I'm going to actually do what I was just told to do, which is I am going to meet with as many employees as I possibly can. I'm going to listen to them. I'm going to hold space. I'm going to find out what's working, what's not working. And so I looked at the well rather than the faucet. And I concentrated on us as a logo, the macro, what does the quilt look like? And then as I started to meet more and more people, I started to understand, everyone's patch on the quilt, everyone's specific uniqueness that they bring in every single day. And so I have this really nice balance now of going up, going down, or as Gary calls it, clouds and dirt.
Totally.
So as you set out to meet with everyone and understand what was going on, for some context for everyone that's listening, VaynerMedia is it almost 1,000 employees?
You're at 800.
800 employees. And so what was the timeline that you challenged yourself to talk to everyone over?
I didn't give myself a timeline. I really didn't, because I'll tell you why. In giving myself a timeline, I felt like either I would be rushed, and it just didn't seem like as someone that started in project management a zillion years ago, this wasn't a project to manage. This was going to be organic and getting to know people. But what I did do is I set up 15-minute meetings with everyone. And by the way, it took me almost 3 years to get to everybody. And that meant repetitively also, because my day is spent with individuals and with groups of people, it's also spent in operations meetings, in leadership meetings, in finance meetings, in resourcing meetings, and putting out fires everywhere. So it's a really nice, no day is the same. And I'm juggling a lot of different things on my plate. And I like that. It's a different way of multitasking because you can't really multitask with human beings.
I'm going to get specific because I know we've got a little while to talk, and I'm just so curious. When you sat down for a 15-minute meeting, did you have a formula, a format you were following? What were you trying to get out of each meeting?
Yeah, it's a great question because I did have a formula for some people, and I'll tell you what that was. It was, let's play Rosebud, Thorn. Rose, something that's going great. Bud, something you're looking forward to. And of course, the thorn is what I really want to hear, right? What's a challenge? What's really like, what's potentially making you a flight risk? These are the things I was listening for. And I used that with new people. I used that just like I would do what I now call a stay interview. You know how we all pay attention to exit interviews, which is phenomenal, but they're gone. They're out of the building. We now do stay interviews in my department. But I would look at that thorn as, what are they telling me? And what are they telling me that other people might think? Or what other people might feel? So that was a big one that I did, especially for new joiners, like in the first year. For other people, I would say, why don't you just tell me like something you're really proud of? And I would also say, paint me the ideal picture of your job. And then I would understand if the job that they're doing is different than the job that we thought they were doing. So I would ask I continue to ask a lot of open-ended questions. And the deal for me is being able to hold space in a non-judgmental way, because I actually want to hear the ugly. I want to hear what's not working, because we can fix that. There's nothing that we can't do except fix the crisis that we're in right now. But we can certainly navigate through that with transparency and authenticity. So the other thing I did was, when we moved to our Hudson Yards office, which we're in now, is I had an enormous whiteboard installed. And I do a lot of coaching on that whiteboard. And so for some people, I would do a values exercise. For some people, I would find out what their limiting beliefs were, what their imposter syndrome was. And they didn't even know what that was necessarily. But I would ask questions and probe so that I could find out what was holding them back from being their greatest self. What was holding them back from having that conversation with their manager? What was holding them back for asking for a promotion or a raise? What's holding them back from knocking on Gary's door? Those types of things. Because again, I think of my role in many, many ways is to listen to people, as I said, in a non-judgmental way, to literally hear what they're saying. And B, to then take action. Take action. They're coming to me for a reason, not just to be a receptacle, but they're coming to me because I'm in a senior position. I have Gary's ear, and there are things that we can do. We can create change easily, especially with someone like that at the helm.
Now, Claude, the last time I was at the agency, I was in your office, and I saw you in action, like working kind of in the transition from our conversation into your next meeting, where it was obvious that there is a capacity in your job that is very much like therapist or guidance counselor in a way, right? You are giving that space to listen, to hear, non-judgmental, but like how can a manager get to that point where you can ask those questions, but how do you get to the point where the employee feels comfortable being so vulnerable and answering honestly, right? Like a manager can ask for vulnerability, but you might not get it. Like how do you get to it?
Well, I mean, you actually answered your question. A manager can ask for vulnerability if they are showing their vulnerability. I mean, like let's what's good for the goose is good for the gander. And what we know, and I think that this crisis is changing things, and we'll get to that, but what we know is, look, human beings are wired to connect. The bottom of Maslow's pyramid, and I'm sure you've talked about it today already, it's safety, shelter, security. The next one up is belonging. So the culture that VaynerMedia exists in is one of, I call, belonging and bravery. And that means we are wanting every single person to feel as though they can be themselves when they walk through the door, right? In order to do that, the managers, me, Gary, have to be as authentic as you possibly feel comfortable being. This is not going to be a culture where you're going to come in and shield yourself, because I'll tell you, it's not going to work. But there are other places that does work in. So that's the first thing, and the first part of your question, which is a great question, but the answer is literally, you have to show up in order to ask that other person to show up, right? Mm-hmm. So, and how do we do that? We do that with a lot of training. We do that with a lot of conversation around empathy and EQ, as you well know. That's what Gary's talking about all the time, what I'm talking about. Simple acts of generosity, acts of kindness. We're talking about the ROI of kindness today. The biggest drum I beat every day, externally and internally, is why aren't we more human at work? Why are we not the same Claude that goes out for that brunch with her girlfriends on Sunday, or the same Claude that goes to the soccer tournament, or the same Claude that goes to the playground with my daughter? Like, what has happened to us to make us so shielded? Well, we were never asked to be our full self at work. This is a new revelation. So anyway, the real deal is we have to do a lot of training. We have to do a lot of conversations like this. We have to do a lot of listening and then rerouting. We have to sniff out where there might be bullies, because that's just not going to work here.
Yeah. So I know that Gary also has a policy where he does 5-minute kind of open door meetings, right? And so how would someone decide whether they go to you for something or they go to him for something? How does that dynamic work? Well,
we're two sides of the same coin. So you're going to get something very similar in our different vocabularies. But please walk to Gary's office first. I think it's so important to have time with him. He's not going to necessarily fix it on the spot if there's something going on, but he's certainly going to punt it over to me, or we're going to punt it to a senior leader, or we're going to punt it to whomever, someone on my team. So I want to say, you come to either of us, but I encourage people to go to Gary all the time. And people are either really stoked on it, or they're like, well, what am I going to talk to him about? And it's like, don't worry about it. You will come out of that meeting flying for a good 30 days, because it's who he is.
I imagine there's some people that are just so excited to get in there, and there's others that put it off for years.
And I tell you what, when they put it off for years, and that's one of the questions I'll ask, which is, hey, have you gotten to see Gary? Or when was the last time you checked in with Gary? Oh, actually, I've been here 9 months and I never have. Cool. Then I'm writing his admins right now and saying, we got to get Chris in there in the next 3 weeks. Like, not urgent, but, so people are, it's really interesting. There's some people that start in their first week, they're like, I want to go see Gary. I'm like, okay, hold on. It's actually a line, a big line, a big list, I should say. But
I'm sure he's a big draw for probably why people are wanting to work there, right? To just be around that energy.
It's a huge draw. You feel it when you walk through the halls. You feel our culture when you walk through the halls. And when he's there and he's present, it's a whole nother amplification of, energy and goodness.
So you have a few offices, right? Is it still 4 offices?
No, let's see. We've got, VaynerX is our holding company. Mm-hmm. And VaynerX is at 800 people. VaynerMedia proper, the advertising agency, is about 625. Okay. But we've got 3 offices in New York. We've got an office in LA. We've got Chattanooga. We've got London. We've got Singapore. So I think that's about 6 right now. And now, this is our office.
Now you've got 800 offices.
We've got 800 offices, which is amazing. And, in a blink of an eye, we went from a non-work from home culture to a working from home culture, which is incredibly inspirational to see that people rallied very quickly.
So I'm curious, if you go back 2 months to when you had the 6 offices, how did you facilitate feedback and the relationships across all of those teams? Were you doing these kind of Zoom sessions with people, or how did that work before?
Yeah, so a couple things. One, we use the technology Zoom, Slack, Hangouts a lot. Mm-hmm. So jam sessions are something that I've been doing for a while, whether or not present or on virtually. There are other people on my team around all these geographies that will absolutely do the same types of things. It might be a little bit different because they have different personalities. About, I would say, a year in, maybe 18 months in, it was really obvious to me that who were the people in our company that had a very similar DNA to myself and Gary and a lot of the OGs. And I started calling them culture champions, because I could lean on them to go talk to Jonathan when he might be having a bad day, or to go talk to Chris and those 13 other people that just joined 3 weeks ago and do a coffee round robin with them. Because the culture is, you're cultivating the culture. You've come into the office. You're part of us now. Every culture is everyone's responsibility. We do a lot of organic training and development. So we have been using Kim Scott's book for, I guess, almost 3 years now. And we Vaynerized radical candor, if you will, but we call it feedback training. And so we do that on repeat. We do manager 101 training, 102 training. And again, these are things that I do. These are things that other people on my team do. And these are things that other leaders can do, because it's not, we have a deck and people can follow along. So that's, one of the many ways that I scale, and that we also are able to touch so many people. Because again, that's the job. That's the job description.
So do you have actual culture champions that they've got a title, or they're in separate meetings, or how do you get on the culture squad?
Well, you raise your hand. That's the first way. Or I'm sitting with you and I'm like, hey, Chris, would you mind? Like, I love the way that you are. Would you mind if I had some new hires, like, meet you and you take them for coffee in the next 3 months? And you'd be like, Claude, I'd love to do that.
Yeah,
or,
I love that.
Yeah, I mean, I love your vibe, Jonathan. Would you join one of the onboarding sessions with me? Yeah, I'd love to. I mean, who doesn't want to get picked for that? It's like getting picked for the all-star team.
Totally. Now, there's a question here from Terry that is curious if you have any kind of formal training as a coach, like as a leader in this capacity to run and operate all these training sessions for what it sounds like what you do on a consistent basis.
Does Claude Silver have training? Does
Claude Silver have training as a coach? Yeah.
Yes, and I actually trained as a psychotherapist about 1,001 years ago. So human behavior is something that I'm incredibly fascinated with. Starting with my own human behavior, and then doing a lot of coaching certifications when I lived back in San Francisco a long time ago, as well as I'll just go there, like clairvoyancy training, past life regression training, chakra training. Like, for me, I use a big grab bag when I go into life, because you never know kind of what tools you need or you're going to want to use. So in terms of the other question was, I think, the training in terms of doing manager training or facilitating. I don't have any training as a teacher or anything like that. But, before I was a chief heart officer, I worked on the floor. I was one of these people. I speak fluent agency speak. You know what I mean? So I know and empathy, I can empathize a lot with what people are doing on the floor that are strategists, project managers, client service people. I know where our deficits are, and I know where we want to get to. So with that, it's really pretty easy and common. I use common sense to know what we need. And of course, we use bespoke trainers to come in and really train some of the other stuff, like negotiating skills. I'm not the person.
Right. I love it seems like the foundation of business knowledge that you have makes the potency of your coaching and advice that much stronger. Whereas somebody that just comes in and is surface level is not going to have that same impact. So I think it's really important for leaders to embrace the people working with the people and make sure they have a seat at the leadership table, to be a part of the business so that carries through.
Yeah. I just want to echo that. If I hadn't been on the business side for so long, it would take me a lot longer to understand what it is, what my remit was, and how to do it, how to get there.
Yeah.
So we talked about connecting the 6 offices, but let's transition into connecting the 800 offices now. How's that transition been for you? And I know even like yesterday we were on a call together for 10 or 15 minutes, and your daughter, was in the mix showing a book. I was saying hi. And that's such a beautiful aspect of what's going on right now. That's that silver lining, is the authenticity of seeing the real Claude in your environment. Right. And so I'm curious how that pivot from being a non-work from home culture has been for you and the broader organization.
Yeah. So we were talking the other day, and I think I mentioned the word triage. When all of this happened and went down, every company had to go directly into kind of triage and reactiveness and figuring out how to get our people safe, how to make sure that they have the right equipment, the right Wi-Fi speed, all that stuff, right? And we were plugging holes as fast as we could. And what do we do for working parents? And how do we let 800 people know that the 120 people that have parents are going to have to time out at certain times because they have to take breaks? So we did all that. We're definitely in much more of like a test and learn phase, I would say, as we transition down this road that we're all transitioning in. So I just want to give that kind of as a backbone of what I know we've all been doing, but I've kind of titled it a little bit for my own self, like triage, test and learn type of things. for me, I didn't actually think about what it was like for me because I was the front line of the triage of making sure that I was writing the handbooks and writing the guidelines and all of those things. But it wasn't until I noticed that, my partner has a job too, and we don't have any childcare. And, my daughter is 18 months and she needs a lot of attention and So there were so many gifts, obviously, in being home full time. And there's also the challenges that are amped up. They're amplified for me now. So I think that those were the things that kind of on a personal level were challenging for me. We're getting into a groove as we're 6 weeks in. For me, what I'm doing with these big jam sessions and making sure that I'm seeing multiple amounts of people, whether or not I'm seeing people in Singapore tonight at 9 p.m. New York time, so I can see them at 9 a.m. their time. Like, for me, making sure that people are feeling, again, that there's a community and they're connected and that they belong and they can still feel me, they can feel us. For the company at large, they have been so impressive. They have rallied in a way that has really surprised me in just a beautiful way, because I don't know. It's they just did it. They just didn't. They didn't kick and scream. They just went for it. And so, we're a creative advertising agency. And so this is pretty phenomenal. Now, when you're a bunch of creatives and strategists and you're used to like jamming together in a room and putting stuff up on the wall, now you're jamming together and then you're going off and creating and coming back. It's a whole nother ball game. But the concepts and the executions and the creativity that I have seen come out of this agency in the midst of where we are today as a culture, all of us, is just overwhelmingly beautiful. I mean, today we just launched a new campaign for Temper, the mattress, and it's all about people using their beds as their offices. 6 weeks ago, I can tell you that's not what we were going to go live with. So that kind of like, it's just
the battle against the standing desk.
Yeah, the battle against, right. And funny enough, I just saw my first request come in. We could send someone a standing desk at their home. That's my first request. So I have a feeling we'll get a good 20 more.
That's funny. So you mentioned before you weren't a remote company. I mean, you had a few offices, but the general opinion was not a remote culture, right? I've heard Gary speak about this before. He likes being around people and touch and feel and look over someone's shoulder and interact and collaborate. And I'm very much the same way. In fact, he had a video that I like tagged Jonathan in, and I'm like, yes, exactly, just like this. This is how I feel. And now fast forward,
because I've been saying to you forever that we need to be more, because I'm the like 100% remote one over here in Boston, right?
Right.
So how has your opinion changed, or has the company's opinion changed on the topic, and how will it impact the months to come?
The change is overwhelmingly positive. I mean, Gary himself is now saying he thinks he'll do Fridays from home and just do virtual meetings. He's getting so much done, because if you imagine, this is a guy that's on a plane every day, pretty much. There's something. So let me back up for 1 second and say there is something incredible and incredibly vulnerable about the intimacy that this screen is providing us. I'm not in your space anymore, but you've invited me into your space in a different way. I'm now seeing your office, and I see your stuff on your walls and the basketball and whatnot. But imagine you're now seeing someone's bedroom, or you're seeing someone's closet, because that's all they can see, or you're seeing someone's kitchen table with the, people walking by. It's a very intimate invitation that we have been, quite frankly, forced into. And going back to this idea of empathy and kindness and what we believe in, the amount of, and vulnerability, the amount of just wherewithal and compassion that one needs to have entering into this type of environment is overwhelming because, quite frankly, we all have biases. Someone could have a bias about you sitting there with the basketball behind you. You're going to you might have a bias as just a human being when you see someone on a kitchen table with, all of a sudden her husband walking by and you're like, I didn't even know she was married, like all kinds of stuff.
Yeah.
So it brings up this other level of authenticity and trust. And it is something that I do really think that we've rallied around in such an incredible way. And we were forced into this. So, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I wrote down a couple minutes ago, I started, how do we bring out the real you on Zoom? Because there are so many people that, they're tucked away in a corner of a room that's quiet, and because they don't want to let real life in, because they're trying to stay focused and do their work. But it's really interesting to say, what is going on? And if it's okay to extend that invitation, I think we'd get to know each other a lot better.
I do too. And so that's one of the things that we do in these virtual meetings. And even on the teams, they're doing this. And because I've said, I really think you need to normalize the situation first before you go into, project management and you got to get this client to pay or whatever. Like, that's all real and that's right. Mm. But we also have to normalize, yeah, my daughter's going to be with me, Jonathan. I'm sorry. Here she is. I need to go eat lunch, or I'm eating my lunch. I hope you don't mind. I haven't been able to get away from we have to normalize this also with icebreakers. I call them icebreakers, but they could be whatever. Like, what did you watch on Netflix last night? Doesn't matter. I've been doing some of the ones I've been doing lately are your talk show host. Who are the first two people you have? And it's just quick fire. What's your karaoke song? If you could go back to any age in history, any period in history, what would it be? And it's literally rapid fire, rapid fire, rapid fire. And today someone said, I want to go back to the 70s because I want to see Led Zeppelin live. And I was like, yes, I'm going to use that one. But now I know that she's interested in Led Zeppelin and 70s music. And by the way, she wasn't even born in the 70s. Yeah. So these are this is good stuff.
On the other side of inviting somebody to be wholly themselves in this environment, right? I'm curious your perspective. You said you're an intuitive empath. I feel like I'm the same way. And so much of communication happens non-verbally, especially when when you're drawing energy from others and you're together, that communication is non-verbal. But in this environment, how do you pull, that connection through the screen in a way that you can when you're together?
I don't have the magic answer there, but I will tell you that I think eye contact goes a heck of a long way. And there's something about this connection, whereas I know you're looking right at me or you're looking at the screen. I know when I'm looking at my phone. I know when you're taking notes. I know when you're completely checked out. You know when I'm checked out. This has created a very different type of interaction with one another that I think is different than obviously when we're in person, because we can feel each other's vibe and I see your body language, all that stuff. But also when we're in person, we have a greater ability to look around and not make eye contact. When we're on the screen, and yes, I know our eyes are all getting completely tired from Zooms, but there is something here where it's I know you're with me right now. Mm-hmm. I mean, I know that, and I'm with you. So again, I don't have the magic bullet, the secret sauce, but I do know that there is a trust that I believe is built here, and we're both in this together, and the ritual of a handshake is now gone. That will be gone for quite some time, I imagine. We have to create new rituals now, and that's interesting. And maybe that is the icebreaker, or maybe that is round robin. What did everyone watch for Netflix, or what is everyone making for dinner? I don't know what it is, but it's up to us, all of us human beings, but certainly as leaders, to provide our teams and our people with options. Absolutely. Because when we all go back, and that is going to be a whole nother piece of work. Yeah. When we go back to the office and stagger that and all of that, are we still going to elbow bump? I don't really know if people are even going to get that close for a while. Yeah, so what is it that we can do today that we can take forward with us as leaders, maybe, and by the way, maybe it's every day at 12 o'clock, you and your team do wall sits for 5 minutes.
I'm just waiting for someone to come up with a computer monitor that has the camera in the middle, so you can actually like look in the camera and look at the person. Like, it'll be interesting to see what products emerge as a result of this. Like, I bet the blue light glasses are just like spiking.
Oh my gosh.
It's interesting. Chris and I's good friend, Aaron, he had wrote a post about like how the Jetsons, when they had their like video chat monitors, they didn't show themselves. There was no selfie view looking back, right? And that's a thing with FaceTime and with this now. You have a tendency to like gravitate towards looking at yourself, not directly at the other person. And like how that was a misstep in video communication.
Yeah. The Jetsons, I mean, they knew it. They, back to the 70s, right?
They knew it all back then. Led Zeppelin and the Jetsons. So, okay, so the topic here is the ROI of kindness. And we all know that kindness builds great organizations, builds great relationships. So today, especially when you're making decisions to send someone a standing desk or whatever, how do you navigate the desire to support the person with the company need to balance profits?
Yeah, well, today, the way I'm going to answer this question is probably a little bit different than I would have answered it 2 months ago, 3 months ago. We try to be as giving of a culture as we possibly can in all ways, shapes, and sizes. Right now, we really need to focus on the logo so that we all have jobs and the employees. And that's a balance. We've always had to do that, right? But there was a time that I think we were almost employee first, then logo. And now I believe we need to just switch the scales just a little bit. And maybe it's 51% logo and 49% employee. It's slight. Mm-hmm. But right now we need all hands on deck to make sure that we are staying not only afloat, but that we're thriving in this period in time. And it's very difficult to do one-offs right now. I'll be honest with you. We'll see what happens here. A lot of times, just to be transparent, when someone asks for a standing desk, they have to bring in a doctor's note. No one can go to a doctor right now. So I don't know what to do. I'll have to solve that in a second. But the most important thing is that we can keep our people, and we can continue to run a tight ship, and we can continue to cultivate this culture 3.0.
How have you navigated some roles changing? Because I imagine that people have had to shift a little bit in terms of either the project they're working on or the job they're doing for the company. Yeah.
Not only roles, we've let people go also. So that's a whole nother thing. And that's not unique to us in this day and age. In terms of the roles, I can't tell you that there's been a whole lot of shape shifting. I think that there are things that people are leaning into more than they were before, just because of the pure the reactiveness, and now proactively. For example, if you're on the client service team, proactively knocking on that client's door to figure out their new payment terms, because they might not be able to pay you net 90, net 120, it might be like 360 now. So you might be negotiating more. You might be more in sales mode, getting incremental revenue and pitching more ideas if you're creative. Like, for example, the temper ad that I was telling you about, that was pitched. It's all user-generated content, right? So I think people are just leaning into different parts of their brain, which means different parts of the job. And I don't necessarily think they're new jobs, new roles that have come about. I haven't seen any or heard of any yet. But it's really giving us as a company an opportunity to become that 3.0 that we want to become, a leaner, a leaner company that is not bloated in any way, shape, or form, and that can really be out there with our cutting edge ideas and our beliefs. So, Gary's beliefs on what advertising and marketing really need to be. I mean, that is where we're going. I think the advertising, you didn't ask me this question, but the advertising industry as a whole is changing as we speak. I mean, first and foremost, a lot of it's getting slashed.
Yeah.
But we're changing, and I think the way that we will greet our clients' briefs to us will be very different, and what we create for our clients, I think, will be much faster. I mean, if we all know that the majority of the human race right now is on TikTok, so that's 15 seconds. So you gotta be able to catch someone's attention in less than that.
And Jonathan and I are also on TikTok now as a result of Gary's incessant talking about it.
Great. I can't wait.
It's incredible the amount of creativity that's originating there right now. You see it across every platform, even on Instagram and on Facebook. Like the stuff that people are engaging with, even on our traditional platforms, are now reposted TikTok videos.
So
yeah.
creative.
And the memes. I mean, there's just so many of us we're having to laugh at this in many ways, because of the predicament and this amazing time that we're all experiencing together.
Yeah.
In the Western world,
So I have two kind of big follow-up questions, I guess. The first is, you mentioned this 3-year process of doing 15-minute meetings with everyone. And then all of a sudden it's like everyone's reality changes in a period of a week or a couple weeks. So how did you fast track check-ins with so many people to make sure that they were handling this okay, or to figure out the new quilt? Yeah.
I put something out on every single the global Slack channels and every office channel, which said set up time with me. That's exactly what I did. And I don't think you'd be surprised to know that how many people did set up time with me. And then what I did was, depending on if I knew that person, or when I asked, hey, this will be in 2 weeks or whatever, I found out by talking to them on Slack if I could actually just put them into a group chat. Because were they missing the connection? And that's different. Or were they just needing some chief heart officer? Which, by the way, isn't ooey gooey. It's also like, let me tell you what's really going on right now. We're really trying to, stay afloat and thrive. So, I give people the real deal.
Yeah.
Regarding you having the time to, whether it was in the office or now posting that message in Slack, to actually meet with everybody, there is a question here, which is good, by Mesa. How do you recharge and have the energy yourself to talk to everybody and be authentic and be sincere and actively listen?
Well, in the Gretchen Rubin test, I come out as an obliger. So, and I can send you that link that I took this personality test.
Please do.
I'm an obliger. So taking care of myself is something that I have really had to work on throughout my life, and I have to work on daily, which means taking time to meditate, taking time to do some yoga, if not stretching. Obviously, hanging out with my daughter is great and fulfilling, but exhausting. So cooking is really important to me. And I'll be making some tacos later. Something that is really interesting. Oh, thank you. Someone sent the quiz out. Something that's really come up that is bizarre, and I never would have thought about it because I never would have had this kind of time with her, is I'm now drawing. I'm literally, I'd love to, I'll take a picture and show you this. I'm looking up how to draw easy animals on YouTube. And there's an elephant, there's an owl, there's a cow that I drew today. But it's relaxing me. I would have used that part of my brain.
That's a great skill too, because if you've ever been at like a macaroni grill where you can write on the tables, like being able to pump out an owl or something is a great party trick. So. Yeah,
I want to be a popular mom, when this is all over. But it's a phenomenal question. And I told myself 4 weeks ago that I was going to at least try to meditate 3-4 times a week. And I use an app. And then do yoga 3-4 times a week. I use an app. I do some weights. I listen to a lot of music when I can by myself, and that might just be on a 15-minute walk. So And it's something that I work on all the time. So thank you for the question.
Of course.
So another tough question, I guess. You mentioned, the reality of having to let people go. I know it's something a lot of businesses are facing, a lot of entrepreneurs I'm in mastermind groups with. I think of you as one of the most empathetic and people first kind of leaders. And so when you have to approach something as difficult as that, how do you do it? What's the conversation like?
Yeah, well, thank you. Thank you first and foremost. The conversation, I go into that conversation with as much grace and generosity of spirit as I possibly can, recognizing that I'm going to change someone's life right now. And it's not great. It's not a great time. So that's the first thing, is that's what I do for myself. Mm-hmm. And then what I say is, Sammy, I'm really sorry that this is going to be a difficult conversation. Or Sammy, and we don't have a Sammy, so that's what I'm using. Sammy, I'm really, really sorry to say this is going to be your last day. Or Sammy, as you know, we've been restructuring the creative department now for 5 months, and we would have had this conversation 6 weeks ago, and then COVID hit. And so we're having it now. I know it's really, really uncomfortable. So those types of things. Mm-hmm. What I'm able to do on the end of that is offer up our networks, the ecosystem that Gary has created. We have something called an alumni network, alumni program, which is not as robust as it normally is. But what that is, all different kinds of CMOs and whomever send in to Gary or us like, hey, I'm at Campbell's Soup and I'm looking for a project manager. Hey, I'm at so forth and so on. I'm looking for a social media manager. And that's a wonderful opportunity for me to then say, Sammy, I know you are really interested in moving to Chicago and there happens to be a role here. Let me introduce you. I can't promise you anything. Let me introduce you. And that's really that's what I can do. Let's go for it. Sorry.
No, I was just going to say, I've always loved hearing, from you and from Gary, how much emphasis you put on helping in the next step, right? It's not just, this is the end of your road here, but even what Gary did for you when you were resigning, and he's like, what do you care about? Right. And then all of a sudden, here's this role happened to still be at Vayner, but yeah. I love the emphasis you put on providing guidance to get where they want to really go.
Yeah. And thanks, Jonathan. The way I know what Sammy is interested in is because I've spent a lot of time with Sammy. That's the thing. The fictitious people I'm telling you about, I've spent time with them, or their manager tells me, this person has always wanted to work at Netflix. Do we know anyone at Netflix? That kind of stuff. So, and you only get that by engaging in conversation with someone.
Right. Okay, so we'll transition from that, such a hard topic, to a more positive note, which is ROI. So all of this conversation about caring for people and investing in people and asking the right questions and coaching, and this is all leading to producing a better culture and a better company, and there is a return on that, right? So when we prepared this topic, I think it was prior to this, but I still think it's a really important thing to cover, because every decision that we're making today has some sort of ROI, and you've got to make the decision on, do we do this today as a result of how it's going to impact the company in the months to come? And so how do you think about ROI, or what are some examples of how you've invested with a great return?
So letting people go. It's actually a really, really good place to start, because we just came from there. When you're able to help someone on the flip, think of that ROI right there. They're going to stay in your network. We want to keep people in this ecosystem, because that person that we just helped place over there will one day be the CMO over here. Will one day work at Bazooka Gum, and we can buy Bazooka Gum and market it the way we want. You know what I mean? So that's the first thing is, and that's just karma. I mean, that's kindness, karma. It's it's playing by the golden rule, which is how I live my life. And I think it's incredibly important, which is you just want to take care of people the best you can. And yes, that does mean that we're going to let people go. That does mean that some days are not going to be as sunshiny as the other days. But we really want people to know, like, we care about them. We want the people that are at our company right now, we want them to be there for 10 years. You know, I'm already seeing who's going to sit in this seat whenever that day comes. And I've seen that already, you know, 3 different times. There's 3 different people I can tell you that would be great to sit in the seat. So that, I think, is a way that ROI comes to life, because they're just being themselves. And I think to myself, holy cow, you can do this with your eyes closed. Like, you are exactly what the future needs. Mm-hmm. So anyway, I meandered a little bit, but the letting go, I think, we can't say enough about caring for people, especially today, and what the karma is on that. I think that when you spend time with people, that comes back to you tenfold. And by the way, I don't spend time with people, or Gary doesn't spend time with people to even have it come back tenfold. But that is energy, and that energy I can use to help other people out. You know, it's an interesting question. What's the ROI of kindness? Because I think, well, what isn't the ROI?
So someone asked a question in an earlier session that was, how do you convince leadership or management or the CEO to make investments by proving there's some sort of ROI? So I think, you know, you're fortunate to have the relationship you do with Gary, but at companies where there's not as much receptiveness, is there something you'd recommend for people?
Yeah, I actually get this question a lot, because I work in somewhat of a utopia. I understand that in terms of my relationship with Gary, and also who he is as a CEO, and very much an HR-led, HR-driven CEO. The answer that I always give is, first and foremost, you know, don't change who you are. If you are the next CHO, or if you are a giver, or you're a natural coach, or you're a natural whatever it is, keep being you, play to your strengths, because there are others like you that you will find one another, and you will create your own groundswell and your own culture change. It might start off small. But guess what? So did rock music. It started off small, came from the blues. You know, I was trying to go Led Zeppelin, but I couldn't. But so did the pop movement. You know, Andy Warhol didn't just like start one day and do the Campbell soup cans. It was a movement. And so these culture change, you know, these changes, you get people together and you get groups together and you rally, and soon enough it will be noticed. You know, and whether or not you have a CEO that wants to lean in hard on that or not, someone in senior management will. I just know it. And the world is changing as we are speaking. You know, you can open up any HBR article right now. This is a phenomenal cast that you've had today, that we're all speaking of. We're all in the same red thread, aren't we? We're all talking about kindness, humanity, giving back, empathy. We're all talking about this.
Yeah. It's inspiring. And I know people have been commenting all day on, how do I infuse a little bit of this into my organization? And so I guess if they don't feel like it's there, you can either create it or you can find an organization where it exists, right?
Yeah. And yes. And organizations, we are going to see new things sprout up as we emerge out of this epidemic. We will see new companies sprout up. We will see new types of leaders sprout up. I think that we will see a rise, and I hope, and I do believe that we will see a rise in servant leadership and more empathetic leadership, understanding that we don't, you know, leadership from the top down in an ivory tower, it's just not going to work. Look, more and more millennials are going to move. I think it was in the New York Times yesterday. More and more new millennials are going to move out of cities right now and into places where it's more affordable and they can probably work from home. So, you know, the talent And I think it was the last person you had here from Uber was talking about like the enormous amount of talent that is going to be available and accessible to us is outrageous. So it's just an amazing, incredible time that I don't think your topic could have been more timely than today.
Well, I love that perspective.
Yeah.
Jonathan, anything else you want to chime in with before we start taking questions? Because they're flowing like faster than
I know. They're coming in real fast. It's been so on point. I know that we had one question from Lo on our team who would have wanted to ask you how to infuse or how to shift a culture's an organization's culture that doesn't necessarily have empathy with a culture of empathy. And I think we just hit on that, right? It's like now is a catalyst moment as long as you have the intentionality to do it. And like you said at the beginning, you have those culture champions that you can lean on and you empower them, right?
Yeah. And remember that if you're invited into a room, like you're there for a reason. Use your voice. Like you are there. And that is something I tell a lot of younger folks, especially young females. Like, we are not there to take notes. You're not there to be a wallflower. You're there to add something. Yeah. You're there. So be an addition. Don't be a subtraction.
Yeah.
Love that.
I couldn't be more passionate about I know the ROI of kindness it was kind of meant to quantify empathy, right? In a way that gives a return to a company. But at the same time, like in advertising, in branding, in marketing, in my world, like not every brand activity has a direct ROI. But like you still have to do it if you want to build your brand and infuse your personality and your mission into the market, right? And the return on that is more long tail, hard to quantify immediately, but you do it.
Yeah, you might not see a sales lift today, but you will see a brand affinity and brand loyalty tomorrow. That sounds like a fortune cookie.
Another T-shirt. We've been collecting phrases all day.
Let's go.
What's up, everybody? I hope you enjoyed part 1 of our epic conversation with the amazing Claude Silver. There was a lot of meat in that, a lot of actionable takeaways of how to infuse empathy into your organization and be an inspiring leader for your team. Claude is one of the best. But of course, that was only one half of our conversation with Claude. So definitely tune in next week for part 2, where we get into really the meat of what matters, and that's your Q&A if you were there live for Training with Empathy. It's often not the keynote that sticks with you, it's the Q&A, and that's what is next week, Q&A with Claude for the end of this conversation that we had with her for Training with Empathy, now on Process Makes Perfect. Tune in for part 2.
Hey, thanks for listening to Process Makes Perfect. If you're watching on YouTube, we do have an audio version available everywhere you listen to your podcast, so be sure to check that out. If you liked what you heard, please leave a review and be sure to subscribe to the channel here, and we'd love if you would tell a few friends or family or anyone you think that could benefit from this. You can find me on social media anywhere at Chris Ronzio, or the company Trainual, that's Train UAL, like a training manual, at Trainual, anywhere you want to follow us. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.